Thank you, Speaker. Speaker, my question to the Minister of Education. Year after year, Francophone children in the East End of Toronto are assimilated in local English schools because their community lacks a French language high school. Anglophones in the East End of Toronto have high schools with sports fields, auditoriums, and many amenities. No such high school facility is available to Francophone children. Article 23 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms gives Francophones in Ontario the right to schools that are equivalent to those of the local English majority. Will the minister uphold the Charter rights to equivalence and ensure that the Francophone kids in the East End of Toronto are not treated as second-class citizens?
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we recognize the tremendous advantage students have when they speak more than one language, and that's why we are supporting the vitality and sustainability of the Francophone community. So, Mr. Speaker, we have increased annual funding for French language boards by 25% since 2013, which is more than $340 million. To me, Mr. Speaker, that says commitment. We also know that in the east of Toronto, families are looking for French education. And so that's why, since 2013, we've provided $208 million in capital funding to CS Viamont. And we also recently announced this year, Mr. Speaker, that we are providing $80 million to support 9 capital projects for French language boards. And, Mr. Speaker, I do want to say that the member from Beaches East York has been a strong advocate for these schools. And I want to point out, including more than $16 million to be invested in the Viamont School Board to support the creation of a new French high school in Toronto.
Supplementary.
Again to the Minister of Education. Minister, the only school on offer for Francophones in the same neighbourhood lacks a sports field, has fewer amenities, and is landlocked on less than an acre of land. On April 30th, Premier Wynne publicly stated that the government must always ensure that support is in place for minority communities that will allow them to have equal success. Given the realities of assimilation and the equivalence requirements of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, given the need for the province to provide leadership to defend those rights, given the Premier's commitment, what will this minister do to uphold the Charter rights of Francophone secondary students in East End Toronto?
Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to thank the member opposite for this question. Once again, we recently announced this year that we're providing $80 million to support 9 capital projects for French language boards, including the $16 million to be invested in Viamont School Board. But, Mr. Speaker, I just want to point out that the member opposite would have us think that, frankly, students in the French language board are not doing well. But the reality is, Mr. Speaker, that enrollment is increasing. In fact, in 2016-17, over 105,000 students were attending French language schools, and test scores continue to rise. Over 76% of students in French language schools have met or surpassed the provincial standard in reading, writing, and math, and on grade 3 EQAO. For grade 6 tests, over 81% of students have consistently met or surpassed the provincial standard. Mr. Speaker, all this to say, those students in the French language board are doing extremely well. I'm very proud of the work of the educators in that system and proud of our investments.
Thank you.